automated.
Hello again, and welcome to 3reate. I'm your host, Andrew Newman. 3reate features two types of episodes in a single feed, weekly and interviews. Each week, Nathan and I discuss current trends, our projects, and whatever else is on our minds. We'll also bring you fortnightly episodes where I interview folks across art, science, and technology, where we dive into their stories and get to the heart of how creativity drives them. My AI co-host will now introduce this episode, and I'll be back with you in about a minute. Thanks for listening.
Hello, I am your AI co-host. In this episode, hosts Andrew and Nathan dive into the art of getting things done, both individually and as a team. They start with a simple but powerful philosophy for personal productivity. Break down every goal into small, single-day tasks. This approach prevents overwhelm and the scope creep that plagues so many projects. They expand this idea to team management, especially in tech, arguing that a manager's primary role is to protect the team from unnecessary complexity and endless meetings. By setting clear processes, fostering asynchronous communication, and empowering team members with ownership, managers can eliminate chaos and create a culture of efficiency and accountability. The conversation wraps with a look at how these same principles of providing clear context are essential for successfully working with AI. And now, the humans.
All right, we did it.
Yes, we caught ourselves and started to record a little bit earlier than we normally do.
I know. I was late. I was debugging.
As is the life of a builder.
I find that I'm much more efficient. It's kind of scary where I'll go into work with maybe 2 objectives and I'll get 4 done.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's 1. And
Know what it is. Sure.
Yeah, people are probably like, oh, you're just trying too easy of things. No, I'm just really focused on what do I need to do. One thing, get it done, go to the next thing. Like we were talking a little bit before this, and I use the Apple built-in reminders app for task management. I just write a thing that I want to implement or add or a thing I need to do. It's very simple. One thing, develop EULA for application. Add this feature, build this mock-up, whatever it is, keep it really simple. And then I do it, check it off the list, and I go to the next thing. It sounds insane, but it's the only way to get things done. You can only do one thing at a time, and people get really into task management, too into then how do I organize my tasks?
100%.
And if it's too complicated, it's too big, you did it wrong. Everything on my task list is something I should be able to do in like a couple hours. Sometimes it takes longer. But I think we've talked about estimation before too. I have a friend and former colleague who recommends you can't estimate any sort of technical project more than a day. If you set out to do something in a single day and you don't get it done, then you've done too much and you need to break it down smaller. Anything outside of a work day, you can't really estimate against, which I agree with.
So I'm coming from an engineering background, so it's actually inverted thinking. We're breaking out your tasks by making sure they fit within time frame rather than taking a task and fitting it to a time frame.
Yeah, it's like the ultimate goal is release the app.
Yeah.
Right, but that's way too hard to plan and break down. I could release today. With the feature set that I have, I'm choosing to hold back a little bit more and polish it up before I was going to do this stuff anyway, but I was like, I could release and then do it. I'm like, I'll just take a couple more days and add better features, make it easier, make it better, make it more polished. Yeah. It's really easy, I think, to get into the trap of tweaking stuff. I have a bunch of stuff I want to get accomplished, and I've just moved the line of where does the public get to see that.
Mm-hmm. Good distinction, I think, to clearly lay that out, like ways you could break out tasks. This is specific to other concepts that we're talking about, like engineering, software engineering tasks, but I think you apply it to many other tasks as well.
Yeah, it's sweep the floor, hang the curtains. You can't do both at the same time. Maybe you want to reorder it so that you hang the curtains first and then sweep the floor in case you mess the floor. If you're spending any more than 5 minutes trying to organize your tasks for the day, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, there's some other barrier.
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
I don't manage my tasks. I write stuff down. If something's super important, I'll put it to the top. Or if I don't get it done in the day, I need to get it done the next day.
Yeah.
But I find in the corporate world or poorly run organizations, it's just a constant onslaught of stupid. And then you have stupid meetings to talk about the stupid shit. And like asynchronously.
Yeah. Asynchronously.
Working asynchronously is seemingly really hard for folks, but it's really easy. It requires you to think about what is actually the most important thing, and then how do I communicate it? And again, it shouldn't take you hours and hours and hours to like write a doc to communicate a thing, but you should be able to like write a doc, send it to your team or send it to your folks. They can comment or ask questions on their own time. And then within a couple days, you have a decision, or you have a meeting where we've come to some big misunderstanding, or there's a kind of a complex thing that we were going 15 comments deep. Let's just talk about it for a couple minutes, then move on. But then what I see is people just continue add. But if you're not clear about what you're trying to do or what you're trying to accomplish, then the scope creep kind of phenomenon happens. And so it's like the task list is one thing. And then if you do need to collaborate with other people, write about that one thing.
I think that's the key to it. It's not the idea that working asynchronously is hard. It's communicating what you need to communicate correctly and effectively. That's hard.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk a little bit today, where we kind of talked last episode about how do you manage. I kind of shit on managers for 90 minutes.
The entire episode.
And I'm okay with that. I've been a manager. I run my own company, so I feel like I'm kind of dog fooding it. But I mean, that's a big tactic for management that I don't really see happening. Your job should be breaking down that scope creep and saying, hey, feature A is now too big. Can we get this done in a day? Yeah. Well, no, we have all this other stuff. Okay. How do we break this down to get it pushed as soon as possible in a day? Right. And then it's, you can't do it in a day. And then you get an argument. And so people try to appease other people. But again, this whole process works beautifully. I've done this in other companies. I do this myself. I've done this with teams. It sounds so easy. What's the catch? You have to do it.
Yeah.
And so your job
that's the hard part.
Yeah, your job as a manager needs to be enforcing that process to say, we've bit off too much. How do we separate out what's the most critical thing to work on in this day or this week or however you're measuring time? If you're measuring time at the week, you're probably still doing it wrong. But like feature, we're going to add a search box to the website. That's going to take a week. Why? Well, we have to code up the search. We have to do a design on the search box. We have to code it up. We have to have a back-end service that allows it to work. Well, can we get a back-end service without a design? Well, sure. Okay, great. Go design the service, make it work. Right? Can I curl it, or can I use some command line function to make the service work? Yeah. Okay, great. It works. But objective is still get the search box on the website. Okay, great. Designer, design the search box. It shouldn't take too long. And then once you get that, get it to the front end team or the front end person to code it up, and it'll probably take a day or two. But if you have a custom design or you need to have some sort of different parameters or cases, great. And then wire it together and you're done. And that should be like, let's call it a week. But you can break that whole thing down. And what I see so much happening is the team will say, well, yeah, we need the backend service and the service needs blah, 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 blah. And now we've invented this massive problem that gets more and more complicated every time someone talks about it. If you say implement the API that you're going to search off of, okay, great. What does that need? Well, you should have hopefully infrastructure for the APIs. If you don't, then you have to build a lot. And now it's become a much bigger thing. But then you follow that same process. End result, have a functional API. A good engineer would ask, to what scale or how many searches are we expecting? You don't need to make a massive, super redundant cached infrastructure to do that, probably. It's an undefined problem. Right. But what I see constantly is scope creep. Now you have to have a meeting with the designer, the front-end engineer, the back-end engineer, probably some platform team. Now you have like 15 people involved in this like seemingly simple add a search box to the website. And from a product perspective, you're traffic copying all this. The way you should initiate this is you probably write a PRD or a document to say, we're adding the search box to the website so that a user can search for pizzas. We're selling groceries, but we just want to search for pizzas. We don't want to search for everything. We just want to search for pizzas. And I'm a value conscious shopper. So if there's coupons or specials for the pizzas, then I want to know about it. That might make it more complicated, but now you've narrowed it down from all groceries to pizzas and some pricing information. right?
So would the suggestion here just be create something like this PRD, product requirements document, for these types of tasks? There's I think there's a huge element of education when it comes to stuff like this. Specifically in the software engineering world, I've seen it a lot where depending on the expertise of your engineers, not everyone's going to think about solving it the same way.
Yep.
Once you have a solution in your mind, it's very hard to get off that anchor.
That's why you write it down.
Yeah. It's when somebody has an idea for a solution, once they're thinking around that solution.
That's why you write it down. So the product manager should write the requirements. Why is somebody going to use the search box?
Oh, you mean write the requirements down? I thought you meant write the solution down.
Well, sometimes that helps. Like, the customer needs to search. That's the solution. How do we do it? Product manager, right? Business says we need a search box on our website. Okay. Product manager says, what are we going to search? Who's the user? Why are we doing this? The pizza sale is coming up, and we need to be able to have people search for the pizzas on sale. Or not sale if they want to buy other pizzas. Okay, great. You write up, it doesn't have to be a 10,000 word document. The whole PRD thing is maybe something to talk about. The way I typically approach this is the ultimate goal is to add search to the website. We're going to iterate it on the first step of having pizza, right? No ice cream, just pizza. The persona would be a user of the website, maybe a value conscious user. They may be different people, they may not, but make sure you're getting them the information about the product, a sale, or financial data, right? In this instance, I would send it to my team in a Slack channel. The designer is there. Your UX people are there. If they're not the same person, a lot of times they are. Your engineering team is there. Say, hey, here's the new thing, search, pizza search, whatever we're going to call it. We need to do this. Take a look at it. And I would expect the designer to say, oh, we have a search design in our design framework, or we don't. We need to go do that. I have a lot of questions about who these users are and what other information they might want to be searching for, how they're going to search, right? Like, yeah, great. Okay, let's either put them down in the doc or trust that the designer is going to see this and be like, okay, I need to go do a quick UX session with some users, or I need to go talk to the design library UX people,
UX
right? So we need to figure out what we already know about this user group. They probably know the data model or how people are interacting with your current site. Front-end engineers should be like, yeah, once I get the design, it should be good. We've never done user input text on the website before. This is a whole new thing. A lot of questions or things we need to discover. Back-end team is probably asking like, well, what are you, how do we want to access all the different attributes that we have in the data. And then what I like to do is have each of those folks or whoever else needs to be in there. There's all sorts of other functions in a tech team. Have them write down their design, right? The designer design is like a visual of that search box. The front end design might be some code. It might just be like, we need to have a modal for a pop-up search or just a static box on a page. There's all sorts of different ways to do this. I have an opinion because this is my job. The designer and the front end person can talk back and forth to figure out the best way to do it. Back end team probably writing some kind of a schematic or trying to understand how fast does the search need to be? How might we use the results in different ways? Are we going to add it to the cart? Remind me later function, like all that kind of stuff. And then you can start shaping it. This exercise for this specific example should take maybe an hour, and it should just work. And if it doesn't work and there's a bunch of questions, you have a quick meeting and answer those questions. But when I see a lot of times it scope creeps into, we need to be able to search everything. That's a hard problem, but also no. Our initial request is I need to search for pizza on sale or special pizza. What about ice cream? We have ice cream we sell too. That might add some tech debt, but we're not going to work on that problem right now.
I think that's why a bit of education needs to be incorporated too, because those kinds of questions come up from whatever history they have with that process, and they naturally start to move that way. And when you build a team or manage a team, you teach them how to think about it so that you don't have to play traffic cop.
That's what the product manager does, but the traffic copying should be more like traffic control to make sure the engineering team isn't blocked, or if they are waiting on something that you can help facilitate that information exchange. The management should be invested in defining what I just said as a process. Generally speaking, that's what should happen. That's how I like to operate. I find that that's the easiest way to actually get done, because otherwise you It's otherwise a lot of teams will want some sort of ritual, some agile thing where you have to put it on a board and then refactor a bunch of other stuff. And how does this factor against other priorities and blah, 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 blah. I like to treat people like adults. And the engineers should be able to say, hey, this front end, once I get the design, it should take a couple minutes, it take an hour. I'll, squeeze it in wherever we can once I see what we need. Oh, that's way more complicated than I was thinking. It's going to take a little bit more time. This other thing I'm working on is either going to get pushed, or do I keep working on this and then we just delay that? Meanwhile, the backend team is doing whatever and they're designing services or adding whatever they need, or, we found we have to rebuild the cluster because it doesn't have the capacity, or whatever the problems are that arise. And again, the product manager is kind of like traffic control, making sure that everything is still moving forward. But this idea that you have one thing to work on, well, this is one thing, there's always others going on. But then you as an engineer or a designer, you need to know, hey, I was planning to do this thing, this business request came in. How critical is it?
Yeah.
Oh, the sale's in a month. Oh, okay. So I have time to finish up whatever else I was planning, but I still need to do this stuff. Using my example from earlier, put it on a task list. Figure out front-end code for search box based on design input. Or investigate if I can use existing search infrastructure and expose that to the front end application or whatever those tasks are. And then you should be able to do it.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a balance between planning and execution, right? I think that paradox of not knowing what's to come. So you end up in this weird planning paradox.
But I find that people don't plan themselves, and then they take every request in. That's part of the problem. You basically have a team of 5 people.
Makers that are just projecting down to,
Now, if you have 5 other people on your team who also aren't planning, who also don't really know what they're doing day to day, minute to minute, hour to hour, now you have a huge problem because you have a bunch of conflicts. And then instead of trying to manage those conflicts, what I often see a lot is then you get excuses. Or you just get bullshit, right? Oh, we can't do the search. It's whatever. What do you mean we can't do the search? Like, searching on a website is a really common function. Like, the sale thing is a little bit different, but then it's because I have this whole backlog of other that I've already, either committed to, or I don't know how big it is. A lot of times, especially with engineers, I overcommit myself. So, this should take an hour and it takes 3 days.
I mean, there are things you don't foresee.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But
no, I get it.
But you also have to, like, when you're doing engineering, like I was just doing this before I started talking, it's really fresh in my mind. I hit a block and I was like, well, it does work. I'm going to make a new task just to come back to this and fix it. But it works and I'm going to move on to something else. And I think the thing within the task management is you get this whole list of tasks that become unmanageable. And then you have to have, especially if you have a team, a meeting, backlog grooming session, which is the dumbest thing I can imagine to spend time on. And what I find is that the important things continue to bubble to the top, and all the other stuff sits there and it doesn't get done if it's not important. Maybe I don't ever go back to the thing that I was trying to solve that I didn't do what I initially planned to do, but it works. So maybe nobody else thinks it's important, right? And if someone complains, I can say, oh yeah, I can go pick that thing up. But then I think a lot of people are probably saying, how do you just not do whatever people are asking you all the time? You don't own your own time. No, I absolutely own my own time because I choose what I do and I choose what tasks I do. Again, sounds really simple.
So bringing this back to teams and how things work, I think there are a few elements that stack a little bit, right? When you're working in the team, sometimes it's very difficult to take a step back and see these things that you're observing now. They may be clear to someone who is maybe one level up, or someone who's jumping in for the first
your manager
context.
Your manager should be helping you learn these skills or identify these. That's my point.
And when you have a large enough team or organization, you often put in processes so that you're not all scrambling and doing things willy-nilly. Right? So how do you balance between getting the right perspective in whatever size team you have, and when do you implement or enforce process or refer to process, and when do you know when to break those processes?
And we were talking about the process. It's now a dirty word, and it's not. If you actually want to, I
didn't realize that.
A lot of people think process is a dirty word, and if you ever want to accomplish something, you need a process.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. I've hit this personally in my work in the past. I talk to people about this kind of stuff. I can't get anything done. What's your process to do stuff? How do you decide what to do? Oh, I just, whatever in the email or whatever is in Slack or, whatever my boss tells me. Well, you're not going to be ever successful. In a lot of instances, your boss's job is to get done. So they're going to constantly be giving you stuff. You need to work with them to understand what's most critical and give them the information to say, hey, that thing you had me working on last week still isn't done for these reasons. Do I need to stop this or do I need to focus on this other stuff now? What's the most important? And a good manager would probably hear that and say, why isn't it done? Let's dig into this to understand what came up. Oh, a bunch of server refactoring or whatever the problem is. The businesses are always demanding and never accommodating. So then you need to figure it out. Your boss can communicate to whoever asked, or you could communicate. In an ideal situation, you're empowered to actually reach out to people and say, hey, I know we got your request. We're finishing up this other thing. We think we'll get to it next week. Is that going to work for you? And if they're like, no, then, but most people will be like, yeah, that's fine. Or they'll say, no, it won't work because we moved the pizza sale up 3 days because we're trying to take advantage of this closeout sale in the freezer, right? Now I need to reprioritize this thing to make it happen. And that all can happen asynchronously as well. You can email them or Slack them or instant message them, whatever technology you're using. But that also then requires that you have decision makers or defined structures of how people are working. I find in a lot of modern companies, everything's flat, which is just an excuse for lazy management and that nobody knows what to do. So then you have to call a meeting with 7,000 people to be like, well, I can't get to this thing till next week. Is that okay? And then you get 7,000 opinions. Right. Most of which have absolutely nothing to do with reality, but it's like, well, I'm in a meeting, so now I need to talk and I need to sound important, or I think I'm going to get more power in the company by having a hot take on something. Yeah. And again, it comes back to what is the goal at hand. Your manager in management should be making sure that we're not spawning a bunch of meetings. Like if you have a request, I don't know how many times I hear in IT capacities, the IT team sucks or they never want to do anything. Yeah, there's that. There's an IT personality that is high control and low communication. But in most organizations, that should be acknowledged. People tend to be very good at what they do, but maybe they shouldn't be talking to other people, right? You're an expert in your field, and then also somehow an expert communicator is insane. As a manager, you have to work with people who are really talented and can bring a lot of value to the company, but maybe they don't have the best interpersonal skills. Maybe they don't have the best communication skills. And you can always try to help people grow. But I know a lot of people who just can't communicate well to non-technical people. You either need a way for them to communicate and then other people to ask questions, or have some sort of an intermediary to do that. But management really needs to be focused on setting the processes, making sure people are aware. What are the expectations? If you get communicated to, our company's expectation is you reply within 24 hours or whatever. It sounds crazy to a lot of people, but I worked for a company in the past that internal communications were expected to be answered within 48 hours, unless you were on vacation or something. And external communications were 24 hours. And it sounds weird to say, but it's goddamn, did that company actually communicate? I'm not going to say what they communicated.
Yeah, I think that was what I was going to make. It's not like it's strictly a rule where you have to do it, but it's just more of setting expectations and letting people know how to communicate or to expect a communication. Well, if someone drops the ball multiple times, and that's something you allow.
I find every company I've worked for, people don't take it the extra mile in this management's job to say, okay, you're a new employee to company this is how we do things. I see a lot of, we don't set the expectations or explain the norms, like the culture stuff. People just assume you either know it or you'll figure it out. Sometimes that's true and sometimes it's not. Mm-hmm. I also think that most people aren't even aware. That's super important. In my opinion, any company should have a end of day policy for a Slack. If someone Slacks you, you should be either responding or letting them know hey, I saw this, I saw it, or I'll get back to you. And I think it's really easy to have that get out of control. And on the flip side of that, it needs to be when you communicate to somebody, you have to communicate the question or the problem in a way that they can respond. Asynchronous. You have all the time in the world to type up any kind of Slack that you need to communicate to somebody. And they have theoretically 24 hours to respond to it. And you shouldn't go write a book, but hey is the worst Slack you can send. And I've also worked in companies where that was explicitly like, you cannot just say, hey. If you're going to say, hey, follow that with
your request.
words.
Yeah, exactly. That's more of an annoying thing because of the notifications.
It is, but right. No, but that's
swarmed with these notifications.
But that's just it. People screw it up and you don't go yell at somebody. The point there is to minimize notification fatigue, but also then force you to say, be pleasant, but then also follow up with some sort of information.
Yeah.
Because it's asynchronous, right? If I just come into a room and start barking orders, like but on Slack, I need this thing from you by Thursday for the pizza sale. Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Or sorry, I can't get to it. This thing, or I'm going on vacation, talk to this other person or whatever.
Yeah. There's definitely a subtlety and an art to the communication though. And I think that's what we're trying to get at is a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this too, where I assume that the person that I'm messaging has the context or understands it. So even though I ask the question, they come back and like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, shoot, I did not say this was in context of this.
But that's great, right? Be like, hey, I don't really get that, or I don't understand.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? And then you can exchange information. And again, what I find so much of is it's like the company is such a fire hose of cluster because you don't have process. You don't have owners of tasks or projects or even lines of the business. That's a fun one. So nobody really knows who to go to. So you get like death by committee at these big group channels where everybody's talking, but nothing really ever gets decided or done. And like, that's management's job to be identifying that as a problem, being like, why didn't the project get done? Oh, well, we spent 6 weeks trying to figure out who to talk to because marketing raised the request, but it turned out it was a finance thing. And sometimes it does take that. And it's not like it's 6 weeks, hour by hour, but people don't respond for 3 days or they're on vacation. If you have people on your team going out of office, you as a manager should be implementing a way to
coverage policy.
I worked at a company that didn't have that and people would just be gone offline. So I would reach out to their manager and be like, hey, so-and-so on vacation. They'd be like, oh yeah. I'd be like, great. How do I get this thing done? Well, when they get back, not acceptable. Someone else on your team or you need to figure out how to unblock my team. It's insane that our entire team is blocked because your person is out of vacation. And you should be able to take vacation. You should not have the expectation. You have to answer these questions.
Yeah.
And if you don't, it's something as simple as updating your status with I'm out of office, talk to this person. So then you don't get the constant Slack pings of all these questions. And then when you come back, now you have to go through all these questions that are a week old or whatever and try to figure out, is this even relevant anymore? And now you're spawning a bunch of communication that isn't necessary because it's either handled or it hasn't started yet.
Yeah. And
that's a culture thing. A manager should be setting the culture and the expectations. A lot of times managers then have all these rules. And that's not how you do that as a manager. As a manager, I would say lead by example so that when you go out on vacation, you tell your team, hey, I'm going out. So-and-so is who you talk to, probably their boss, or maybe it could be someone else on the team. Hey, Andrew is going to take a turn at answering all the crazy that I get when I'm out of town. Help him out if he asks you, or this other person. When you're going, hey, Nathan, I guess you're going out on vacation. Don't forget to add some sort of indication to the rest of the world so they know.
Yeah. Back in the on-premise days, when you had email servers on-premise, everyone had like an auto reply out of office. I don't know if people do that anymore with the number of communication channels we have.
They don't. And I've worked in Slack only, email and Slack hybrid and all sorts of others. And I always do it. And I have people always like, why did you put that message up? Like, so you know that I'm not here and you know what to do. But that's management. And like, you as a manager of a team, you should have some sort of a team culture and set of norms and expectations that you are running. And then you need to be communicating with your peers to make sure that other teams are aware. One thing I see all the time is every engineering team works totally opposite. And there is no real engineering culture at a company. And so using the out of office thing as a great example, Andrew puts his out of office on Slack, but then gets a million Slacks because he's a service owner. And everybody on the other team who needed whatever done ignores that Nathan was the one you should have been talking to this whole time. And it says very clearly on Slack, but I am just so used to going to Andrew because he's the service owner. And then I'm either getting disrupted on vacation or I come back to this like crazy chaos that I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Or they actually figured it out. Nathan was the one to go
Yeah,
anyway.
You
and I just lost an hour of my life, right?
Yeah, you read the whole thing. Yeah. So I think there's, that I've seen in my work history, that there's a sort of two camps, and one that's hybrid in between, which is probably, but you have teams in large organizations and enterprise, and then you have these small startup-like teams where a lot of the process isn't there, but they're just natural, understood working dynamic that you have all with each other.
Yeah.
And so then you have those weird in-between stages where you may have process, but also small teams. Sometimes people follow the process. Sometimes they just go by gut feel or how they work with each other. All the stuff that we've talked about applies more to enterprise scenarios with maybe smallish teams, but that you wanted to call out from your experience in working with small startup-like teams. Engineering, I would say, also different based off what you said. I agree with that. There's very much ad hoc, we figure it out kind of deal.
Yeah.
But in different industries or domains, there are different expectations for how people should be working.
Yeah, on call and all that kind of stuff is mostly
exactly.
thing,
Right.
Which I've never seen really handled well anywhere either.
Yeah, never goes well. It's someone takes the short end of the stick. That's it.
Yeah. I think adaptation of enterprise level stuff is fine in a startup. I see so much of just YOLO it, right? You're the first hire. You're coming into a team of 3 people and they assume you know what to do, or you've worked at a startup before and you have to go the extra step. I don't think it really changes if you're in an enterprise and a startup or whatever. It's, if you're leading a team, you need to set the norm or the expectations of how you as a team will function. Because what I see a lot of times is that isn't even done, and then the whole thing is lost anyway. And maybe you're a high functional team and you're producing a lot. You can't scale that. You can add more people in, but eventually that completely falls over and breaks down, or you miss a very important, expensive thing because you're not talking to each other. You're not able to move very quickly on a new problem that comes up, or if the business has a need that switches, you have to refactor everything, or I refactor everything, and then I talk to you about it, and you're like, oh, I didn't know about this thing. Now you have like serialized refactoring across your whole team of like 10 people because you don't know how to manage.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, as a group manager, if your reports are individual contributors, it's making sure that you're working as a team. There should be some way that you foster collaboration across your team of, everybody should be owning their part of whatever you're doing, but there should also be awareness of how other people are working or what they're working on at a high level. You should be able to talk about anything your team does as an individual contributor, or say, oh, that's what Nathan does. He's the expert in that, or he's the service owner in the engineering. But I know what that is. I know what the search box pizza project is. I'm not working on that.
Yeah.
My team, as a manager, you should be able to talk about what Andrew and Nathan are working on. If Andrew's working on the pizza box project and Nathan's working on tax system refactoring
and ice cream,
and you're, as a manager, should be able to say, the next thing up is the search box prototype, which will show at our Friday show and tell or whatever. And Nathan is really shitty at his job, so he's not going to be done for another 2 weeks. Right. The manager should know. I think the one-on-one thing is really interesting. You should definitely be in at least a monthly one-on-one with your
so that's a good thing to bring up too.
Your person.
In things like these.
2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, I think, is important. I would say new person coming in, you should probably be meeting weekly for the first month or so, every couple days, just depending upon what the company's doing, what the level of familiarity with that person is. If anything, put the meeting on the calendar and then check in an hour or two before the meeting. Hey, is there anything we need to talk about? If not, we can cancel. Just making that time available for, and you're talking about work stuff maybe, but also just checking in like, hey, it's been 2 weeks. How you doing?
There are two topics that I wanted to touch upon. Like one, as you were talking about understanding when you're in a team or an individual in a team, there was a trend where there was this idea of you create a document of how to work with me kind of thing, and you would share that with your team. I don't know if that's still done nowadays, but besides that practice in itself, I think it's worthwhile to understand how well you work with people and how you prefer to be communicated with. not from an egotistical perspective, but so that you understand how you do the best work and make sure everyone else knows that, so you all can figure out how to work with each other. I think that's the big piece, as you commented on,
and as
how to work with each other.
As a manager, I highly recommend it. Maybe I'll share mine. I have a generic kind of template I update. What do you do? What are you responsible for? Who do you work with? I like to put in meeting times. I typically don't like to take meetings in the morning, and I don't like meetings on Fridays because I want to be able to finish up anything I need on a Friday. Yeah. Oftentimes you'll have team meetings where a lot of companies will kind of be like low meeting Fridays. The morning thing's weird if you have time zone stuff. Yeah. It's not that I'm not a morning person. I'm usually up by 6 a.m. every morning, but I don't like to take meetings until at least 10 because my day is starting. Something happened the night before. Yeah. Some other crisis has emerged, or there's something I need to be focused on. So it's not that I don't ever have meetings, but I try to discourage them. Yeah. I talk about my communication style, the way that I expect my team to run. So the kind of product management breakdown of the PRD and that kind of process, and why that is the way I like to work. Not that it's the only way, but in an asynchronous setting, some variation of that needs to happen. I'll take that and say, here's this. And as I talk to the team and get to know them, like, how do we want to change this? Or how can what we're currently doing fit into this? Yeah. And I'm very resistant to having a Kanban board and having a bunch of documents and a bunch of meetings, and then we have to refactor. And it's just process for the sake of process is not good either. I usually give a little bit of background about myself, kind of where I live, especially a lot of companies, even startups.
Distributed teams.
Yeah. How long I've lived in the area. A little bit about what I like doing outside of work. If I'm in a specific industry, maybe past experiences, I usually will say I've worked at a couple different places if it's relevant to what I'm within tech or whatever. People take it as that and get the idea behind the document is really, if you've never met me before, you can read this and get some sense of who I am and how I operate. And you can ask me questions when we talk. Almost always I get feedback from people being like, this is awesome. Can I do the same thing? Of course you can. Don't have to ask. Like, just take it and make it your own and change however you want. Right. I also talk about my role, especially because I find in a lot of
that's another topic. Yeah.
In a lot of organizations, especially for product management, if you're not in a software company, a lot of people don't know what it does, and so explaining to them what a product manager is, what my product is or products are. Typically have like a team website once I get in the door, or team landing page or a Slack channel, and be like, go here for more up-to-date information. So how would I start a new job? If I'm managing a team, introducing myself to the team, setting up one-on-ones as a new manager, probably fortnightly if you have a new team member coming in, weekly for at least a couple months at minimum, and then fortnightly or monthly, depending upon how close your team is, like what you're working on, the complexity of stuff. I've had both where it was monthly and fortnightly, or sometimes even weekly. It just depends. I'm as a manager, I'm like, you need my time. It's available. If you don't have anything to talk about in a one-on-one is not for the manager. It kind of is, but it's really run by the direct. Yeah. I don't typically like that too much. I like it to also be an information exchange of, here's two big things coming down the pipe you might not be aware of, company changes.
Eyes on the ground kind of thing.
Yeah, but then it should really be largely driven by the employee. Coming as managers to the document, then learning how the other teams are functioning, who to go to, what are their roadmaps. Again, I'm a product lead in this fictitious scenario. Understanding how decisions are made. What are the quarterly objectives? Hopefully you have them. When is the next set of planning happening? Every company does planning to some extent in some way. Yeah. Where are we at with what is currently in flight? Who are the stakeholders? Getting to know them, getting to understand them, setting kind of norms with the team on, how are we doing stuff today? Usually it's like we don't have a process, or we're all doing things differently. And then it's starting to say like, hey, we're going to have a team meeting weekly, fortnightly, whatever. We're all going to get together, go through any updates, work with each other to share knowledge. I'm really big on a team meeting having a structure of knowledge share. I like to have somebody from the team talk about, hey, if you're running an engineering team, I found this really cool GitHub thing that maybe people don't know about, or I use this new library, or I found this new IDE that I really like, or whatever. And then, updates about company, whatever, is coming down the line, or what the changing priorities may be, or if there's market changes or industry changes, that kind of stuff. And then kind of leaving it up to, I don't like project updates or product updates, but there needs to be some continuity in the team around what people are doing. And I like to have kind of almost like a stand-up style of give a 2-minute update about what you've accomplished and what are you working on next kind of thing, or what do you think you might need help with from the team, or maybe you're refactoring a massive service as an engineer. The team should know about that, and it's probably fine, but
just a heads up.
Try to keep them short.
Yeah.
I really, especially on a tech team, I really, really love show and tells like that. And if I'm a manager of product managers, is a little different, but as a product manager, team lead, I definitely like to have more show and tell time of talking about what have we done this week, what show your feature, kind of like a feature review, or a really just, but low key. It should be fun, and it should be talking about stuff you've done and what you're excited about, or maybe something didn't work and you're like, this thing doesn't work. I would love everybody's eyes on it for a couple of minutes to, or I don't know if I really like this, or I don't know if this is really the direction we want to go, and have some discussion.
The show and tell thing from a product manager led initiative is a really good idea, especially for engineers who may not always have the product vision in mind. So it's sometimes engineers get caught up in the specific detail they're working in. But when you have those show and tell meetings, you can bring it back and say, hey, you built this, and this is how it integrates with the rest of the product and why it was needed.
Exactly.
So ground people.
Shockingly not often, which blows my mind.
Yeah, I was going to say it's super rare, to be honest. And partially because in many teams I've been a part of, the PM role is not clearly defined. So you never really know what she is there to do other than tell you what you need to build.
Or what you did it wrong. That's a really good point. The product... That's a whole conversation probably too. But when it, so if I'm managing product managers, then it's going to be much more on the go-to-market process. Is this a net new thing? Is this a thing we're adding functionality to? How are we deciding as product managers what our most important work is? All this that the business is dreaming up, and product management's a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
If you don't like chaos and you don't like ambiguity, don't be a product manager.
I think that's a key part. If you don't like ambiguity,
the whole job is basically one giant batch of ambiguity. But it's more making sure that the product teams are similarly related, or you're working on a similar platform function or a part of the web app or whatever you're working on. And then that we have some concurrency across our teams and working to plug into however we need to plug into either the larger product framework or inventing that if it doesn't exist, which is typical.
Yeah.
And then having some camaraderie. But as a manager, I'm very much, I think we've talked about this a lot, but I am your coach at best. I'm not teaching you how to do product management. I shouldn't be telling you what to do. You should know what you're doing. You should be already at the table. This is where it's I probably don't manage ACs.
I was going to say, it's a different kind of style that you get the right team to be able to feel if it's done well, it goes.
Yeah. And I've had ICs that are a little uncomfortable with it, but I have to approach everybody in the way they need to be approached, I guess. But I don't think you should be coming to a job in 2025 needing to be told what to do or how your function works. It should be more I have a question on how does this happen, or in my previous experience, this is what I've done. Is that how we do it here? Or how would I do this here? It should be more of a conversational thing versus how do I do a product roadmap? You probably shouldn't have been hired, to be honest.
Yeah. Be more initiative driven where you figure out what you need to do. Don't just wait to be told what to do.
Exactly. Product management is really weird. And I'm mostly used to working in companies or with people who are already high caliber. And maybe they're a junior person, but it's much more of a coach situation where it's here's my problems, help me. Or everything's going great. I don't need you.
Yeah.
This thing came up. You need to be
I've
aware.
got an AI bot to do that now.
I know.
Yeah.
And then the manager, then my job is really making sure the team is represented in however the company represents. If you have director meetings or product feature meetings or however that works, and then making sure that I have good relationships with the engineering people and the business people and making sure, I think my number one thing as like a manager of people is making sure that we're not blindsided by a new initiative or a new thing. And it's like, that's not always real.
Yeah, you can't always prevent that, but
but I want my team to be empowered to do their own. I shouldn't have to be an approver. In some companies, you have to approve, and this is more of like a soft approval. I expect my report to come to me and be like, hey, I need this thing. Or like, you need to approve this thing because reason. And be like, okay, I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I think if you're dictating to people how they work or what they should be doing, other than like, it gets at a certain scale, like it's this kind of startup land, but at a certain scale, you do need to then start like formalizing process of like, how does the company decide on features, or how does the company decide on a new product line, or how do you spin it up or something like that. And again, I would even say at that point, I'm a very bottom up person, and it should be like any new feature, any new product should be like, hey, we see this market opportunity, or we're getting 1 million requests for this thing that we don't do. We should do it. And we think it'll bring value, or we don't think it'll bring direct value. That's the number one reason people are leaving our platform. So I guess kind of like indirect retained value, or like customer retention should go up. Yep. But we know how to measure that, or we know what we're trying to accomplish. Whereas you get in the top-down situation, especially in software product companies, it's like, we need pizza search. Nobody buys pizza on our website. They only buy ice cream. We should be doing ice cream search. Here's the data. 80% of our traffic or sales are ice cream. Okay. Maybe we want to understand why. Is it because we have 2 varieties of pizza and nobody wants it? So should we invest in understanding why nobody's ordering pizza on our website? And that's where, with a lot of management I see go wrong, is then they try to control things, or they are insecure about not knowing everything. A lot of times there's a pattern where management gets together to decide things, and then you have to push it out to the team or motivate the team, or the executive team puts out a new priority. I think in the old way of working, that's normal. In modern 2025, the company needs to adjust to the market. As the vice president of product, vice president of engineering, you're going to have to make decrees. But if your team is working the way it should be, it shouldn't be a massive disruption. Your team's already on the market and saying, oh, well, this other company is expanded from ice cream to ice cream toppings. We should be looking at ice cream toppings. What do you need to do to figure out, should we make a pivot, or should we add that business line? Oh, well, here's my approach. Go take a week and get it done. It's not like Andrew, the product manager, lead, or chief product officer says, we're going to get into ice cream toppings. Go figure it out. That's a very different way of, like I've said this before, especially in product tech teams. The product manager and the product team need to be empowered to do this, because they're the experts. If they're not the experts, that's your problem as a manager to go figure out, how do you get them up to speed, or how do you get new people who are the experts, who can like make decisions and be telling you, hey, we're going to change this thing. We think it's going to increase our pizza sales by 20%. The company's already decided we're selling pizza. I'm just trying to make this better. Maybe I'm not the pizza team, but Nathan's team was working on pizza stuff. Why don't you talk to him and see if they have capacity?
Yeah.
You're smiling. It's either insane or ideal.
No. I feel like that mindset, the agency of effectively customer discovery, someone who is also involved in the business angle or understanding the use cases, having a different mindset. Having worked as an engineer, met many engineers who just like to code. They don't think like that. So my counterpart was going to be you in a certain mindset, but I think to flip it on your side would be, you should be building teams that aren't focused just on being told what to do, but instead you should have that
100%. And that's where
curiosity and the investigative spirit to look at that stuff up.
Your product team is incomplete if it needs to be told what to do.
Exactly.
And from an engineering perspective, there's a lot of engineers who like to just be told what to do or have their little thiefdom. But you need an engineering manager, or a tech lead, or somebody who knows what the team is doing and can help bridge that gap, But in 2025, if you're an engineer and you don't like talking to anybody about what you're doing other than the other engineers, you're probably going to get replaced by AI.
Yeah, go do research or something.
I don't think engineering is going to be replaced by AI altogether, but I think the people who only want to do a little part of the business world are going to be obsoleted by AI. And you're going to have somebody who is not as good of an engineer who can talk to people to then use AI to be a better engineer or to solve the problem in a way that works. Your product team needs engineers who are able to be on the team, who can talk to customer or have the business sense or be asking the business questions of like, why are we spinning up a business line for toppings? We're not selling pizzas. Shouldn't we be focused on that? Nathan's team's focused on that. Since we're already the ice cream team, let's investigate what it would take to add toppings or chocolate. I guess you do Spike to figure out what I don't know. Is it as easy as just duplicating our ice cream database and adding toppings? Do we have to refactor the whole schema? Do we have to... And then the product manager needs to work with the business teams to say, okay, we're going to procure toppings. How does it work in the warehouse? How does it work in our marketing department, procurement? How many of these are we bringing in? Should we have combo deals? That's a business decision. The ice cream business line owner needs to talk to the toppings business line owner. Maybe you as a product manager have the ability to say, yeah, we're going to do some combos, right? In my ideal world, the product manager should be able to say, my product is ice cream, and I'm going to go talk to the topping product manager and say, what's moving the most? Let's get a sale. What isn't moving? How do we make that better? How do we sell more of that? Oh, I'm working on this really cool pizza special search. Could we also add your ice cream to that? Or could your team, who is the ice cream team, plug in to our search thing that we're building? And we're building the search in such a way that we don't have to maintain search ownership, but we are providing the modality on the web to express that to the world. It's probably the better way to build that.
Yeah. I mean, we've been using a technology team or technology-focused team as the example, but I think the idea is building teams that have the agency to really understand use cases, business use cases.
Yeah, I've worked in IT, so it's technical, but it works a little bit different. It's a lot more process-focused, a lot more people-focused. Your software procurement team should have the ability to take the requests for software and to get a determination on what's the best software, right? We need Adobe Acrobat. Why? Oh, because that's what I need. Well, what are you trying to do? Go talk to the customer, try to understand, we get all of these PDFs that we need to edit because they're wrong. Okay, maybe there's a better solution for that. You can go find a better or a cheaper product. Acrobat's not cheap. Maybe you need Acrobat. Maybe you're getting special Acrobat only files.
Acrobat locked, which is ridiculous.
But if you're in an industry where everyone else is using it, great. Right. Now we need to go figure out how to do that. Yeah. That procurement team should have the ability to then go talk to the legal team to get the approval, or the contracting team, the finance team, to say, hey, it's going to be $200 a user per year. We need to bill this back, or we need to have a manager approval if somebody requests it, and plug into the rest of the company and be aware of what's going on. When it comes to non-tech stuff, like I've worked in non-tech before, it's a lot different and it's really industry dependent, and I don't know what I don't know. But I think on the abstract management, you still need to make sure your team's communicating to each other and to the other people. Right. You have norms, you build that culture of however your team needs to work. If it's a really top-down company, then you're just shoveling orders, and frankly, you're doing it wrong in 2025. I can't think of any industry other than maybe medical or some sort of like high manufacturing buildy like type environment where there's so many, it's a linear process. Like you got to get the metal to build the screw to then put it in the thing, and it just has to be that way or it doesn't work. It's like waterfall versus agile. But I think most companies now and most industries, like they cling to waterfall because it gives them control and power. But the reality is you can empower your employees to ask questions and work with other people. Maybe you need a bit more program management function where you carve up the work to like a PDF thing. Okay, what are we trying to do? Oh, we're getting all this crazy requests in. Oh, well, maybe we need a cross collaborative group of people, a matrix team with someone from the finance team who's requesting it, and someone from the tech team, and someone from the
cross-functional
vendor management team who's sending all this in, to sit down together and say, your objective is to now figure out what is the best way to do whatever this problem is. Not, I need this tool, or this has to be this way. Like, can we go to the vendors who are requesting all this and say, hey, we can't use Adobe. Can you give us a non-Adobe PDF? No. Well, we have a form that you could fill out on our website. Could you just do that instead? Oh, sure. Okay, now we've automated it. And I think the focus of every team needs to be first principles problem solving. How do we create a process that humans don't have to do to fix it? If humans have to do it, how do we make it lightweight enough so that it's simple and quick to execute and understand, and transferable to either another person or documented? And it sounds insane, but I think people reject a lot of this stuff because there are process people. I am not a process person. I've been sitting here talking about process for an hour. I'm absolutely not a process person. To work with other people, you have to be a process person. And that's the whole point of this, is because if Nathan doesn't know what I'm doing, we're not communicating.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll have to have a meeting, and I'll have to sit here and explain it.
Right.
But if we have a process on our team of, this is how we deploy software, this is how we validate new requests, this is how we whatever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be detailed, but it's, here are the 10 steps, or here are the 5 things we need to know. Done. Easy. Move on. But then there's process people who want to like nitpick at everything or have opinion about everything. And it's like, you as a manager then need to be like, okay, great. You have some great feedback. Why don't you put that all in a document? We can all take a look at it, and you probably spawn some interesting conversations. But then we need to have the process done by Friday.
Yeah.
And then you have to be okay with it not being perfect. Because so many companies I see, when you bring up the process word, you have meetings and determine and process, and then the vice president gets involved and they have an opinion, and it never goes anywhere. Everybody needs the restraint and discipline to document the thing you think you want to do, write it up. Whoever wants to take a look at it can take a look at it. You were going to try it on this date, and if it breaks, oops. And again, some settings, that's unacceptable. Like medicine, you don't want to go to the doctor and have a new process and then die. Right. Even in healthcare, I've worked in healthcare. I saw it all the time, where the excuse is, well, someone might get hurt, and then we have to spin up committees, and you never get anything done either. But like, first principles, if you're putting a Band-Aid on somebody, you're probably not going to kill them. They might be allergic to the adhesive, so maybe you ask the patient, or if there is an allergic reaction, you have a protocol for allergy. But you don't have to test 70,000 types of bandages before you implement the bandage protocol, probably. There are, and everything I say is a generalization.
Yeah, of course.
And there are instances where you can't do that.
Yeah.
The people who know.
Yeah.
And so then, I make it sound easy, but the reality is like these kind of high level principles, but that's what I do on this podcast. If you want that, go Google it, right? Because nothing I'm saying is unique, right? Yeah. I've said this maybe before on here. I'm a manager. People are mystified. They're like, what's the catch? Like, what's he trying to do? And I'm like, it's really simple. If you read anything Harvard Business Review puts out, you'll realize that getting out of the way and making sure people are empowered is like 99% of modern world.
Yeah.
And then being there when the shit's the fan and saying, okay, we can't do that again, but let's figure out why it happened so we don't do it again, and figure out how to change something, and not being punitive. And I think that's something we haven't really talked about either, is like, how do you handle conflict as a manager? You need to get as much information as you can. If Band-Aid brand thing goes down and we find out they're 50% more expensive, oops, well, we probably should have known that ahead of time. So why didn't we know? Nathan, why didn't you do a cost analysis on this? No, I didn't. Anytime we need to change, we need to make sure that it's not going to be more expensive. That should be common sense, but shockingly enough, common sense is pretty uncommon in 2025.
Yeah.
Right.
Unfortunately, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, but then it's like, instead of saying, I need to approve Nathan's projects, it's like, hey, Nathan, next time we're going to make a change like this, why don't you bring that to the team meeting and mention it to the team so, folks can ask questions, or everybody has visibility, right? And then in the team meeting, you see, how do we make this better? And again, this is small team. When you get to more of a director level or an executive level, all this goes out the window. And I guess having a goal coming in would have probably been good, but I'm really talking to individual contributor kind of style and first line managers, not directors and not executives. Frankly, I don't think directors should really exist. That might be a hot take. I think you need line managers to make sure the team is functioning and people are getting holiday pay. Yeah, and the laws are being followed and no one's being exploited, and then knowing what your team's doing so you can work with other people. And then you have executives who should really be focused on vision and are probably domain experts in either the industry or the scope of what you're doing. Yeah. And then making sure the business is making money. And if it's not making money, figuring out how do we make money or how do we make more money? It's, again, it sounds really simple, but then I, as an executive, want to have say in everything. Well, you kind of have to bite your ego a little bit, and you need to set working styles and systems in place to measure progress and to measure, it's so funny because like product management's the same way. Like you have OKRs or KPIs or some way to determine your success. That's executive management. What's the most important thing to measure as the CIO, or what's the most important things to measure? And maybe that's you dictating, but that's also maybe saying, hey, team, how do we come up with a way to measure our projects? Then you come up with some idea. Okay, great, let's try that. And then next quarter, you're like, maybe like, how do we improve that? Is this still relevant? You just start to add metrics and then people want to measure. And then you have to have a manager of metrics measuring. That's dumb too. It's just keep your job, I think, as an executive should be making everything as simple as possible.
100%.
And trying to get rid of work for the team and not just pushing it onto some other team, but like, how could we take a couple weeks to automate this procurement process? Because we're switching a lot of our supply on everything because tariffs or because everything's gotten more expensive, right? And these are very real managerial problems that people make way too hard.
Yeah, I think that the line of stuff that we talk about when it comes to something like creativity, I'm pretty sure there have been studies where a measurement of creativity, a lot of people tend to initially jump to adding things to come up with new use cases, but equally or maybe even more important is the ability to understand when to remove things. When you have limitations, that often spurs creativity. And I think this is not looked at enough, especially as it comes to our own work. We tend to start adding and don't look at removal as a way to approach things.
Yeah. So, and I think all this stuff too assumes that you're already in management position or you're already on a team. If you're coming in new, you shouldn't really do anything for probably 3 to 6 months. You should be observing. You should be
understanding how
asking questions. If you're an individual contributor, you should be probably 1 to 2 months really just gathering facts and understanding stuff. And then probably taking ownership of some process or task that you should be doing. You shouldn't sit around for 6 months, but in most companies, the biggest problem I see oftentimes people come in, they're really excited or they want to show their value, and then they go up a bunch of stuff because they don't have the context of how the company works. Engineering's a little bit different. Engineering's a little different. It depends on what you're doing, what your team, what your experience is. Like there's the philosophy of day one commits and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a scenario where if you're familiar enough with the technology or the stack or the code, then you may already be able to contribute immediately. For the most part.
Generally speaking, the more experience you have, the less you should probably be doing up front. It should be really good because you need the context. I usually tell people if I start in a position, it's like, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions and listening. If I see something obviously wrong or crazy, I'll bring it up. But for the most part, don't expect me to be changing much of anything in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I just sit back and don't do anything. But once I'm comfortable with understanding what's going on, I can ask better questions and things start to change, right? Because I'm a new person on the team. If I'm the product manager, I have a lot more influence probably, but just by asking questions or kind of, why are we doing this or what brought us to this thing, people then start to like think about, we just added that. Going back to what you were saying earlier, the number one thing you can do is probably remove stuff. It's really easy to add. I don't know. Yeah. This has been a little off-topic ranty feeling to me, but maybe it was valuable.
One actionable thing, and I'll bring it to the hot topic of AI.
Oh, God.
I feel like a lot of people, when they're working with AI, they either don't know how to work with it yet. But in engineering and AI engineering, there's this trend moving towards this concept of context engineering. So when you're working with a model, You're trying to give it what it needs. And there are specific applications to coding and engineering when we're talking about context engineering. But if you try and extrapolate out with working with people in general, this whole idea of managing the context that you and whoever you're working with are working in is also really important within communication. If you're working with an AI, keep in mind this idea of, okay, so what information do I need to give it? When it gives me information back, what are the right questions I ask to make sure that we're working on the same page? So there is this element of you can practice context management by working with an AI and talking about a topic that maybe you're familiar with or not familiar with, and you're trying to understand. It's how do you go back and forth?
I think the people who are the best at using AI are the people who do that.
Yep.
It's interesting. You're going to get me on a tangent now, but it's related to your point that a lot of engineers are going to go away, like we were talking about earlier. If you want to just sit there and write code and do your tickets, I don't know if there's a bright future for you. Some companies, sure, you're going to have legacy stuff that sits around for a while, but those jobs, it's going to be like the mainframe people. There's so many there's so many poorly managed companies out there that you're going to probably have that forever. But the people who get the best with AI are the people who are creative and giving context in enough detail that it's not so verbose and overly detailed that you're almost explaining what to do. You're giving it enough context so that it can basically help you. And it's like, how would you explain this to a third grader kind of thing?
Yeah.
I think I had the aha moment a few days ago. I was talking to a friend, and the big thing when I'm using AI is that you have to explain what you're trying to accomplish, but not what to do. And that's like in product management. Product manager owns the why. I like to run a team in that I have a very strong opinion on the what, but I really expect design to have that opinion, and also a little bit of engineering on like what we should be doing. How we go about solving the thing or implementing the thing is an engineering thing. But again, I would expect design to have some opinion there. Obviously I have an opinion. I don't typically loosely held, or I try not to just even wait in there. It clicked to me that like the how people are kind of gone. Like the AI is still, when it comes to architecture, okay, it's getting better. It doesn't quite know how to build stuff. And I'm just talking net new. Any sort of complicated existing infrastructure, I think AI is pretty far off on being successful in. But when it comes to like building a company or building a new app or building a new service on top of something that might need to reference things, but it's independent, how people are gone. Knowing what to do is helpful. But what I find when I'm doing it is I will describe like what I'm trying to accomplish and letting it go. And then it'll usually recommend a technology or a solution, and I'll read it. I'll use my brain, and I know enough about this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe not. But the people I find that, hate AI are like, how many R's in giraffe, and they come up with these kind of frankly dumb brain teasery things, and you don't get good results. Whereas if you were to say, we're going to count letters in a word, the word is blank. I don't know if you'll get a better result or not. I suspect you will, and it might still be wrong. But I think the better way of this analogy would be to ask AI and say, I'm trying to come up with a brain teaser based on characters, or even say, I'm trying to come up with a brain teaser using language that will take a look at a word and try to have some kind of puzzle about it. What does that look, or how would I go about doing that? And then maybe you'll get a thing, maybe you won't. When you're starting to hit the edges of really obvious stuff, AI in this instance would probably come up with something like the missing letter thing or whatever. It might be wrong. It might hallucinate the actual thing, but the meta context or the philosophy of what it's trying to get at is probably correct. A really easy example of this is I'm building out the Seek stuff. I'm using AI. I don't think I've written a line of code, to be honest. That's not true. I wrote a couple services, and I could have had AI do it, but I was just like, I know exactly what I need to do.
Exactly. Sometimes it's faster to write the code than to write the prompts to write the code.
But so, I'm adding stuff in, and I just added some MP3 enclosure tweaks before we got on the call. That's why I was late. I asked it to, I have a chat going and I was like, here's what I want to do. Here's why I'm wanting to do it. It gave me the code. It worked fine. Modify this function. I kind of eyeball it, but I also try to ask it like, hey, I need the full code. And I just copy and paste it because I'm lazy. Sometimes I don't necessarily recommend that, especially if you're vibe coding, you don't really know what you're doing. Don't do that. Pasted the function in, ran it and tested it. It worked, but it broke something else. Then I was like, this doesn't work. Here's the error message or whatever. And it was like, oh yeah, because you didn't do this. It was like blaming me. And I'm just laughing because I haven't written.
It is Gemini, right?
It is Gemini. Yeah. I haven't written a goddamn word of code in this part of the pipeline. And it added it effectively incorrectly. It mixed up an order. And the thing I'm doing is order
dependent. Yeah.
I saw it actually before I ran it. I was like, I don't think that's going to work, but I was like, okay, I'm not doing anything that
sometimes it's fun to see what happens when you
it broke. I'm pretty sure that was what it was, but then I was like, okay, it was good. I was like, oh yeah, you have the order wrong. I fixed the order and then it worked. It accomplished the goal, but it didn't accomplish the goal in the way that I actually needed it to. Going back to what I was saying, I don't know that it hallucinated. I didn't look at the code closely enough and we jumped into the thing. But what I suspect happened was that I gave it a relatively complex thing to do and it forgot some of it when it gave the solution. Sure. So the end result was the right thing to do.
But it was missing something upstream.
Yeah, but it's incomplete. Yeah. And so then I just have to go back and say, hey, you got these, these two things were correct. These three things are missing. How do I add them? Oh, sure. All you had to do is, and it'll kind of, and I'll be like, yeah, give it up, but whatever. And that's like maybe part of being a manager, right? You have to work with your directs and be like, yeah, you need to add that code in there. And you're right. I should have caught that. And just having the humility to sit there and be like, yep, you're right. Another instance of the same kind of illustration for folks is I have a bunch of variables I'm working with to store stuff in the code and to push it other places or, it's coding 101 kind of stuff. I find that the more of those you have, the harder it is, the harder the AI has time of keeping track of it. So I effectively had to refactor some stuff and I was adding some stuff and I said, I need to add this stuff, added it in, awesome, worked. And I was like, oh, I need something needed to go somewhere else or I needed to add some other function. So I was like, hey, now, this information needs to do this thing. Then it forgot about the things that I just fixed for some reason. And so again, it did the right thing. It was incomplete. And so a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, it didn't do it. It wasn't right. Technically, no. However, it did actually do the thing that it needed to do. It was just incomplete. Yeah. So then I have to go back and use my brain and then I'll usually figure out, oh, it clearly missed these variables or like, I'll tell it like, hey, now these 5 things aren't showing up or this process broke or whatever, and then you fix it. 3 months ago, this wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And it's now working really well. And so again, it's the people who are giving it the what, not the how. And the what is really amended to say like, I don't, what, I need you to process this file in this way with this output. No. What do I need done? I am going to feed a file into an API and I'm expecting to have output in my web application that runs on this technology stack. Yeah. Oh, you could easily do this or invent some crazy thing. Yeah. And if you don't know enough, and then you're already, but if you know, and then most people look at that and be, oh, that's wrong. All you have to do is say, can you make this simpler?
Yeah. Well, I need this. Why was this wrong? Kind of thing. These things are good enough to tell you what it needs to know.
And it's so funny you say that because we didn't really talk about, so I had basically a monolith for Seek's backend stuff.
Yeah.
And I hit constraints.
Oh, context constraints?
No, I hit processing constraints, memory.
Oh.
I kind of figured it would happen. Seeks is a tool that does post-processing for podcasts. My goal is that you record your audio like we're doing here. You hit done, you upload that file to Seeks, and it does the post-processing steps that most podcasters may or may not do, but you probably should make it sound good. Adding chapters to the podcast, figuring out how to title it, transcribing, all these kind of things that some applications do, some don't. Basically trying to say, how could I just upload my raw audio And then it spits out a podcast at the end that I can upload to my podcast host or Spotify if they're using the host. Most of the hosting platforms will use the information you provide over the stuff they generate. Anyway, I was testing with really small clips, like a minute to upload stuff, add a new feature, make sure it works. Because I don't want to sit there and wait for it to even though it's a few seconds. I don't want to wait. I was really close last week to having it done. And I was like, great, it seems to work. I uploaded one of our podcasts to it. It was just this, just put a real podcast through it and it just fell over. It technically worked, but it took 20 minutes to process it. The front end errored because the API response was taking too long.
Yeah, right.
It was blocked. Subsequent calls worked, but it was all just broken. So what ended up happening was the monolith was running everything in memory effectively because of the way AI designed the thing. I was literally hitting operating system constraints. We maybe go into that at a tech, and we're kind of running long, and I don't want to get into all the gory tech details, but I'm trying to illustrate the point. And so I told it, I said, hey, I'm uploading, I think the file was like 80 megs or something. I knew what the problem was. I knew the library that I was using was the problem, and I knew how to fix it. But I was like, maybe it'll be faster if I just explain the problem. Yeah. So I told it what I'm doing. I said, I should publish these at some point, just so people can see
logs,
it.
Yeah, those would be fun. Your work logs. Yeah.
If you want to copy this and spin up your own, I don't give a. I'm building this for me, and I think there's value for other people. I don't expect this to be a massive company, but it will make some money and pay for itself. I'll be able to buy more beer. Uploading 80 meg files of audio. It's taking a really long time. When I try to upload other files, I'm getting a fail, gateway busy. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if I was getting an error, but it was like, I need to help fix it. And it was like, oh, well, the approach you took, like, there it is again. It's my fault, even though I've literally written no code on this project.
Gaslighting.
Was, monolithic and blocking, and it was fine for small file. And it even said it was like, hey, it's fine for small files.
Cool.
But because you're using bigger files, it's a really great approach. And this library is likely what's breaking because it's trying to do everything in memory. And for small files, it's great and fast. But for larger files, you want to take this approach. And I was like, okay, cool. So I did it. It was infrastructure stuff, taking everything out of memory, doing some caching, task tracking, and another service now that will take the tasks and do them, and queuing and all this kind of stuff. And this is all that I was going to do anyway, but I was really hoping that the monolith would work enough to get an MVP out the door. It probably would have been fine, but it's going to take another day to make it right. So I did that, tested a couple times, and it worked. And then I found out that the task service was up. I sent it and said, here's the problem. How do I make this better? And it added a bunch of other technology. It's like, this is too complicated. Is there any way to make this simpler? Yes, you could. And then it gave me a table. It was like option A was the method I was doing, pros and cons. Option B was what it suggested, pros and cons. And then I was like, is there any middle ground? And it was like, no. It's like, you basically implement option A or option B. You might be able to tweak these things to make option A a little bit better, but option B is really what you should probably do. So I was like, I'll do option B. And so I spent a little time to make that happen. But again, if I were to say, I want to use Python and MySQL, and I'm building this podcast processor, do these things, probably not going to work either. So I'm still doing a lot of the service design and the architecture work. I'm basically saving myself time coding. I say I don't write any code. I've probably written some code, but it's pretty minimal. A lot of people, especially engineers, might be saying, well, you're not doing anything complicated. I'm like, I am, but I've just broken it down into junior dev tasks, right? If I was the tech lead on a project, I'd say, why don't you go figure this piece out? We broke some other stuff because we integrated it. Okay, great. Let's figure out how to make it better.
Yeah. Sometimes from an engineering perspective, if you're working in a code base, you do need to say, hey, by the way, I'm using this and this, because sometimes you'll start installing random libraries that you don't do that.
Or you have existing infrastructure, you're using Postgres and not MySQL. Oh, sure, I'll help you modify that.
Let me refactor your DCs.
I'm to the point now where I have too much to give it the whole code base, or there's all these other dependencies that it's tripping over. What I've done is I've given it baseline architecture. So I'll say, given these sets of technologies or the core libraries, and then any relevant kind of tech stack stuff. And then I'll say, give it the problem, and then I'll give it the code along with it. And then instead of having to generate all these and troubleshooting all these things, I'm telling it what it's doing and how it's doing it. But I'm not telling it how to do it. I'm saying, here's what I'm working with. How do I do this thing? And then it will make the determination if it can add in more stuff or if I need to add a new service or use a different library. And then you can prod it once in a while too. But again, it's going back to that. It's like, how do I manage the AI? And I made the joke to one of my buddies yesterday. I was like, I feel like I'm volunteering for AI. But it's taken me a week or so. And I kind of had some stuff already built, but to basically spin up a front end, an API, and the API is now queued and cached.
Yeah.
That was all stuff I was kind of thinking about doing, but instead of taking me maybe a few days to implement caching and queuing, it took me like an hour. Is it the best caching and queuing system imaginable? No, probably but not. I've already kind of beat on it and it works. And so the next step on all this is then I have to probably break it apart and go to say, how do I do this more securely? Or how do I make sure I'm not leaking data? Because the thing I found was the file storage, the methodology that it was using for file storage worked, but it was all in a public bucket. Yeah, if I wouldn't have known.
That's how you get tea.
Exactly, right? And that's why it's relevant. If I wouldn't have known that, bad, because all of the audio would be out there in public. For the testing I was doing, I let it go. I was like, fine, it's easy. It was working. I don't really care if someone goes and scrapes the bucket. But now that I'm getting ready to release this as an actual product, I need to go back. Well, I've already fixed that part, but if I hadn't, I'd have to go back and say, how do I do this? Because I didn't tell it ahead of time that I was doing a production service.
Yeah.
For people out there who are more vibe coding, once you get it working and prototype it, it's usually fine to prototype things in insecure ways, especially if you're not using real production data. But when you go to release the thing, you need to go back to AI and tell it, hey, I need to make sure this is secure, or I don't want to leak my user data. How do I make sure that this isn't going to do it? It might refactor it for you. It might not. But then you usually have to go to the next step to say, how do I myself test this? And then you can ask, what am I looking for in this test? I did this test, it spits out file listing in your bucket. Should an unauthenticated user be able to see the files in the bucket? No. Okay, well, how do I change my bucket so it doesn't do that? So you still have to use your creativity, and you have to think through, and you still have to know enough of this stuff to be responsible. And also, I think if I wouldn't have broken down the things I needed it to do, it would not have produced Seeks. It's not there yet. A lot of the things people are vibe coding, they're not super complicated and they work. Great. You built an app. Cool. Like you're not building $1 billion company out of the app probably, but might make some money too. The vibe coding is getting better where you're able to make something and then improve it and like kind of start feature tacking. Eventually they seem to fall over because it loses context or it just doesn't really know what it's doing. If you don't know anything about software engineering, you don't know anything about coding, you don't know anything about the language you're working in, you're only going to probably get so far. But you might be surprised. That gets better every day.
Yeah.
That's the cool part.
The worse it's going to be. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So I don't know. We're way over on time. Anything you want to add before we...
I mean, if people are interested in vibe coding, context engineering, stuff like that, let Andrew know. And we can go deep into that because it's something he's been doing.
I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I'm vibe coding.
I'm more than happy to provide tips to what I do and how I manage context.
Cool, man. Let's get chatting.
Yeah. I'm going to get some pizza and ice cream now. So
I know. On sale.
See ya.
You can find us at 3reate.com. It's like the word create, but with a 3 instead of the C. As always, we encourage you to listen, watch, do.
We'll see you next time. You can support this podcast at patreon.com/3reate or at ko-fi.com/3reate.
Thanks for listening.